Okay, here we go. Better late than never. Vince, welcome officially to the LovePod, new co-host. I am so excited. Do you want to give us a brief intro for anybody who hasn't met you yet?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where do I start? So cast member of Love is Blind season 6. Pretty good friends with all of the cast still. Um, by day, I'm an attorney, and my previous career was I was on the bomb squad for about 6 years. So, I jump around to high intensity, stressful careers often. So this podcast should be pretty fitting with that.
Oh, come on now. We're not that difficult, are we? I
No,
mean,
no, this is the best podcast because everyone's so nice. So, when I was on it and all my friends were on it, and I talked to people from all the seasons, um, like Love Pods was just like, you guys are
we're
so
the
sweet.
shit. Yeah,
Yeah,
we
you're the
try,
shit.
you know. we it's just me and you now, and we have some help from my mom along the way. But you guys go through enough. We don't need to torture you anymore. So we try to come at it with kindness and with love. And I know, opinions on everybody may vary, but you're all very rounded people. And we only get to see a small part of your lives on this show. So I'm excited that we get to hear your feedback on the behind the scenes from what we see on screen and what it's really like and the differences between filming and then the fan view versus the cast view. So, with that being said, we are on a new network too. We've got lots of big news here. We are on the Reality After Show Network with Johnny Fairplay, and he has asked us to cover Love is Blind UK. So, here we are recapping the reunion. And we'll talk a little bit about this show just to get some insight from you. And the first thing I want to cover is the competition in the living quarters when you guys have multiple connections. So what is that like? Because it seemed more laid back and less drama on UK than it did on US seasons.
You know, I think it's person dependent, right? And one thing I think the show does fairly well at is amplifying personalities. So,
Sure.
like, if you're a cold person, it's going to take that personality and amplify it times 100. If you're, a condescending person, same, right? I was I was pretty quiet and reserved, so take that for what you will. So there are different personality types on the show, and it will play a role. So like for me, I had a lot of women I was interested in the beginning, and tried to handle that accordingly and see who was open to talking. We're with each other for like 12 hours a day, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I would talk to like Jimmy a lot, or I would talk to Johnny or Trevor a lot about, who I was interested in. And like, you need that sounding board, like we all do. Like, who hasn't been on a first date, gone home, called a family member or friend and said, like, hey,
Oh yeah.
I just met this girl. Well, the only other people I have to talk to are the people who are dating these women. So all those guys I mentioned were like super cool, and so like Jimmy, I think we had like one or two overlaps, but he was like, yeah, she's a great girl, like I totally get that. And then there were like two people who, you know, one I had like kind of talked to and like was like, hey, how's your day going, man? And had responded with something along the lines like, yeah, I don't talk to anyone who's interested in the same women as me. Fair. Just avoid
Okay.
them. And
Sure.
then another one who would kind of come to me and like kind of like pull information out of me, like, who are you interested in? And then, I might mention it and he would be like, oh yeah, her and I have like the strongest connection, and she said I'm her number one, and like, we're gonna, do this together. Um, and slowly but surely I found out, some people are full of shit. So
Okay, fair
um,
enough.
yeah. So that's kind of the dynamic that I dealt with most. Other people, it can be a little more aggressive and standoffish. Um, you know, like you know, Jimmy and Jeremy are totally cool, but like obviously, if you watch the show, there was like a little bit there, right? So
Yeah,
everyone's
sure.
experience is just different, but
Yeah, and speaking of experiences, we have I'm not going to ask him to come on unless he want. I mean, Sam, you're always welcome to come on the show. You know you don't need an invitation. But Sam has popped into the live, so I just wanted to say hi, Sam. We are going to talk about you. Nothing brutal. Don't worry. You know how we roll here. Um so that's another thing I wanted to talk about is, obviously there's flirtation. Everybody meets up, right? You do these barbecues or you do these cast meetups and you're seeing each other for the first time. And there was some flirtation going on. I don't know if it's appropriate or not or inappropriate, but there was music playing on obviously on what we're seeing on the show that made like Kat and Ollie's interaction seem so much worse and so much more built up than what they were really talking about. I didn't think they were really being that flirtatious. They weren't being inappropriate. But there are times where you can see the conversations being a little bit maybe inappropriate. So do you think the editing or production plays a role in that? Like when you had your interactions on the show, did it seem bigger than what it was later on? Or did you notice that with other cast members who had relationships on the show?
yeah, I mean, it's definitely true. You know, with me, I didn't notice a ton of that, right? Like I don't have like a ton of airtime, but I was there in the background watching on other people's instances, and you know, if you have resting bitch face, people think like, oh my God, what's with this look? Why are you giving somebody a dirty look? Well,
Yeah.
they have natural RBF, right? And they didn't really mean that. So it really just depends. I'm going to go back to they will amplify your personality, right?
Yeah.
And I can be honest about my observations with people, or we can stay on the nice train. But I'll leave that up to you, Dina.
Oh, I just want you to be who you are. We always want tea. So if you feel comfortable talking about specifics, we're here for it. But everybody, I will give a disclaimer. Keep in mind, like everybody's experiences are different. Those people are not here. So just everyone else be kind. Don't go attacking cast members in their DMs or saying awful things on their pages. Like, this is all our opinions and our experiences with the cast on the show. So yours may vary, but don't come at them ever, ever.
I think that's fair. I stuck up for one cast member, and then all of a sudden, I became very popular very quickly, and not in a good way. Mostly people DMing me like, "Who are you again? I've never heard of
Uh-huh.
you." Like just stuff like that, or just more egregious things that probably not great to DM people. But I let it roll off the shoulder. I mean, doesn't compare to defusing a bomb. But I thought, for the most part, and kind of like that little triangle of like Demi and um, uh, is it Demi, Oli, and
Cat and
Catherine?
Ollie. Yep. Demi, Cat, and
Yeah,
Ollie.
I I'll say it this way. I thought Demi was really, really genuine, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't blame her for kind of stepping away, but
Mhm.
I thought of that triangle, she seemed to be the most genuine. I won't comment on the rest of them, but I thought
Okay.
Demi
Fair enough.
was pretty good.
And it seemed like for the UK season versus the US seasons, there were a lot more get togethers with the rest of the cast. We know you guys had the barbecue on your season. Were there other times that you hung out with the cast? Can
Um,
you hear? Okay.
so yeah, so I think, we hung out a lot, and there's like a lot you don't see, and there's a lot like the producers don't see. So, like we're always together. And like, one pivotal point would be the Lost and Found where Jeremy shows up. Um, I invited him out, and
Mhm.
we were with essentially like all of the cast, right? We were all out.
Sure.
I was out with a group, Sarah included, a bunch of people. I was probably a little oblivious. I invited Jeremy, and it's kind of like one of those things like, oh my God, you invited him? Like, I was like, well, of course. He's one of my good friends, and nothing but love for him. When I do
Sure.
get married one day, he'll probably be a groomsman. He's a great guy. So.
Do you think that changed the path of his relationship with Laura, or do you think that would have turned out the same no matter what?
Oh, I think it would have turned out the same no matter what. I mean, like, if you watch our season and you watch after the reveal, I mean, it's very clear there's a lot of tension there. There's a lot of like pursing the lips. There's a lot of almost a certain level of disdain at times that, you're just like, okay, maybe it's not going in the right direction. And no like blame on either party right there for the anything that went on at the honeymoon, but sometimes you get to a point on the show and you realize it might not work out, right? Because we do have some successful marriages this season, right? And I love seeing people like Johnny and Amy who, like, right off the bat, like, Johnny's coming out of the pods and you kind of know he found his person and that it's going to last. And the experiment's not for everyone. And some people, they find that love and they do the reveal and they get to know each other even more and realize, like, this is just not for us, right? So
yeah. And I think one of those moments, at least for me watching the UK season, was the first time Freddie brought up, and I don't think there was a specific, I think what he really meant was a will, but there was a lot of talk about prenup. And you're an attorney, so I definitely want to hear your take on this. I can't believe that isn't part of the process that all of you, if really by fans and by Kat, it seemed, when it came up in their conversation. But what is your opinion of that, both as a cast member and as an attorney, coming onto a show like this?
I mean, I think you're crazy if you're on this show and you get engaged and you don't have a prenup. And my lawyerly advice on prenups, and I don't do prenups for a living or anything like that, but I do tell friends that are getting married who want one to explain it in a different way, which is like, hey, if we get divorced, the state decides what happens to our assets. We can decide that ahead of time rather than let a court pick and choose who gets what. And that's really the point of a prenup. And when you know somebody for 10 days and you propose to them, you really can't trust that they're being totally honest, right? You don't see who they're texting. You don't see who they're going out with. You don't see the relationships, the people they surround them with. And those are all factors that play into after the reveal, right? I mean, it's important when you meet somebody and you build a relationship with them. It is a very pivotal moment when you do two things. One, introduce them to your friends. Two, introduce them to your family. And I've seen that break a lot of relationships. So, I mean, this show included and outside of the show. So that's definitely something that really needs to be addressed. And, I think the show should offer a prenup service.
Yes.
Yeah, that was Netflix muting me. They're like, all right.
Yeah, they heard you.
They're
like,
going to sue me now.
You get a little alert on your phone. It's actually me. Here's your papers.
Yeah. That was quick.
Okay, so did you get to attend any of the weddings on your season? Because we saw some cast in the audience in the UK weddings.
No. I'm trying to think, like, if because we didn't have that many. If anyone were to have invited me, it would have been like Johnny. I didn't like get an invite. I don't know if he could have or wouldn't have been able to. But like I did get invited to, you know, other parts of the show. I think I was aired on the I was on the barbecue day, like
Hmm.
when we were all on the beach. So I was there. Again, I think just being an attorney, I'm really cautious of what I say and do on camera sometimes. And so when I showed up to that barbecue, I think I just sat in the corner and like ate my burger, with my head down. Uh,
Don't say anything. Don't look at the camera.
yeah, I don't want to get sued.
Yeah. um, okay. Now, another thing I wanted to talk about when it comes to Freddie and Catherine is there's been some speculation that when Freddie gave Catherine these earrings, because obviously point of contention with them was that she likes more gifts and material things, and that wasn't really his bag. But then he ended up giving her these very expensive earrings and I think a matching necklace. And that gave the impression to the fans, I'm sure to Catherine, that he was going to say yes. And then we all know, I'm not going to throw a spoiler alert on here because if you haven't watched by now, what are you doing watching this recap? But he says no at the altar. So is that something that production can kind of, we'll say, guide in, hey, it would be a really great idea. Let's give her these earrings, because his reasoning was kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't at the reunion. So how much does production play a role in the pods, in your conversations, in what happens throughout the show?
I think they can definitely compel you. I mean, right? One of the ways is, other than the people in, other than the guys in the lounge, like my producer's also my sounding board, and they try to stay as like hands off as possible. Um, but they definitely can compel you if they want to.
Okay. So
So
they're pretty convincing.
I think they can be. It depends on who you are, right? Like,
Okay.
for some people, like I think they'll be a little more open to suggestion, and other people are not so much.
Now, getting officially into the reunion, something I really liked that we haven't seen before is they kind of did these little intro packages, with each of the cast members talking about, they kind of had a little line about their experience on the show and a little teaser, what was going to happen in the reunion. I loved that. Did you get, I guess, did you feel like shortchanged that you guys didn't really have as much time as maybe? It seemed like there was more focus on some of the cast members that didn't get airtime on UK than there have been in the US seasons.
I think that's an interesting question because, like, I left the show, I watched the season, and I was like, that's the best thing that probably could have happened for me, right? I wasn't a controversial character. I had some airtime. It seemed like there were a lot of people out there that liked me, that did see me. Not a lot of danger in that, right?
Yeah.
But then there are people who kind of were in like similar positions who I think, wanted a little more airtime, and quite frankly, I think kind of deserve it, right? Because, you know, you've got to think about it. Like, we're asked to give away a huge chunk of our work. And for a lot of people, that means quitting their job or having to just not get paid. Yeah, I'm very fortunate. My work was super supportive. I had plenty of time off to do it. I still got paid. There were some people on the show who had to forego getting paid and, quite frankly, don't, have a ton of money. And so it was a big stress and burden. And showing up every day and working long hours, because it is long hours, right? We're like
Sure.
curbside ready to go from our hotel at 7 a.m. And then, they're bringing us back late in the evening. And then if you really want to, you can stay for night dating. So, like me, I think I stayed up for like 2 days, right? Because I wanted to make sure I was clean and ready to go in the morning. I wanted to make sure I was there for night dating. It didn't bother me, kind of used to that. So I could see where I think it would be nice to invite everybody from that season to the reunion. I don't think that's a big deal. It's not a huge ask. And I think some people would really enjoy it, more than anything, I would just go to see my friends who've, made it that far. Like I really totally would would have enjoyed that.
Yeah, it seems like a real missed opportunity on our side of things on the US. Like they specifically called out friends and family and the cast members at the UK reunion, and then at the US reunions. Obviously, for your season, you saw like previous couples in the audience, but like who else was there, and why aren't we talking to them? And I know there's only so much time to film these things, but there were, I think, a lot of things that could have been addressed, like you're inviting Jeremy out to Lost and Found, or some of the other dynamics and relationships that came out of the show, the friendships, the behind the scenes moments. I just feel like we got a lot more of that on this season than we have in prior seasons. And I, as a fan, would like to see that. You had brought up, obviously, cast quitting jobs or having to take time off. Do you guys get paid or compensated in any way for having to be on the show?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty minimal. It didn't. I'll be honest. It did not drive my decision to go on the show.
Sure. Sure.
And I think anybody would be lying if there isn't a number that you could get paid to go on a show like that, right? If they offered me $1 million, I really don't care the outcome. I'm probably going to show up. But no, it wasn't enough to, it might have covered some of the clothes I bought.
Okay.
Just like a little.
Oh yeah, that's another good
little
point.
show of appreciation, right?
Yeah. And another really great point Demi brought up, and she had even said that she ended up moving back in with her family, and she really just wanted to be surrounded by people that loved her and that she loved, is that the isolation really takes a toll. And so we as fans don't understand, how can you fall in love in 10 days? And how do you get married in a month? So what is that separation from real life really like?
Yeah, I really loved that about Demi. Listening to her in the reunion talk about that, it just came across as like so genuine and so true to somebody whose heart was in it for the right things. And again, I realized that she stepped away, but I just thought it was a really good show of her character. It is hard to step away and go into the pods because it is complete isolation. And again, I'm a little different than people. I've had to go out of the country for long periods of time with nobody around, no cell phone reception, and just kind of like live in the middle of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm fairly used to that. It's nice actually to get a break from your phone. I think I realized like, wow, I'm addicted to my phone, and now I don't have it. I feel so refreshed. I'm having so much more meaningful conversations. And then you see people who are, on the verge of a nervous breakdown at all times, right? They're just like, I'm up long hours. I have unpredictable meals. They're feeding you, right? But it's like, maybe it's not noon to 1. Maybe it's more like 2 to 3 you're getting fed. And I think the lack of control in your life is very hard for a lot of people because it is a complete lack of control. You don't get to say what you're doing with your day. You don't get to say when you eat. You have to go to the bathroom when it's convenient for filming, right? They can't stop production because I go to the bathroom every 10 minutes, and I really do. And I understood that. I wasn't going to make a fuss, but you lose all of your say when you're in the pods, and you get a little bit of time when you go home to maybe decompress. But again, there's no TVs where you're staying. It's not austere, but there's no contact with the outside world.
Sure. Do you guys have access to a therapist or any kind of mental health counseling throughout the pods or the process, or especially after the show when these stories start airing?
So after the show, they absolutely take care of you. And if you need extended mental health services, they're super accommodating about that. I think having one on the show would probably be helpful. And I also made the suggestion bringing back like a previous cast member or two to be a sounding board, right? Because I know that like production sometimes is like, hey, maybe you guys shouldn't talk to each other about the women you're dating, right? You're not going to stop that unless you provide somebody else to talk to. So, I think those two things would probably be fruitful.
And it does seem like there's always one person on each side each season, especially for the men, that is kind of that sounding board. In season one, we saw it was Rory. In this season, on the UK season, it seems like Aaron was really the guy to go to for feedback. So did you guys have a guy who was kind of everyone's sounding board and maybe didn't have a connection, or maybe did?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I talk to a lot of people. I'm trying to think who else was like very just, you could sit down and talk to. Um, Jimmy and Jeremy were always easy to talk to. Like, Jimmy, I think, you could sit down and come to him and say anything, and he'd just sit and listen and, give, pretty helpful advice. So,
Okay. He is not the one. If I had lined you guys all up, I would not have thought it would be Jimmy for sure. But that's the thing. You never know. We only see what production wants us to see and what that storyline is. So that's interesting because I would not have thought it would be Jimmy. What about the dynamic between Kat and Demi? So we touched on this a little bit, but in an interview, Kat had said that Demi was her best friend in the pods. Very clear in the reunion that Demi did not feel the same, and it was not mutual, feeling that Kat was her best friend. So what did you think of their dynamic? And is it hard to, if you're competing, it's got to be a different dynamic for men, right? Because women, I think, can be a little cattier when you're competing for the same person. But the comments that Kat made about Demi's appearance were not nice. So what was your take on that?
I mean, my kind of vibe is that when you're on set and you're surrounded by people, you are really trying to present your best self, but you also realize, like, I can't escape these people, right? And I can't escape, let's say if Jimmy and I didn't get along, I can't escape him. I still really need to do my best to make our relationship work. And that was the vibe I got from Demi and Kat, was that they were doing everything they could to make their relationship work. And I kind of got more of that feeling from like Demi, right? That like Demi was really trying to be, a strong woman, very professional, and it was just one thing I appreciated about her.
And I do like her a lot, but I am going to go out a little against the grain there and say that I don't think she was ready for marriage if her experience changed her so much and had her learn and grow so much in that short period, learning about herself. I think it's amazing that she found a sense of confidence and felt open enough to talk about her endometriosis. I think those are all amazing things. But if you have changed so much in a month that you didn't realize you had all this growing to do, maybe you weren't ready for marriage. And I think a lot of people on the show want that relationship and want to find a spouse, but maybe aren't ready for that. And I am going to call out Steven in particular for this, because obviously Sabrina and Steven, even though they were a fan favorite, didn't work out for in the long term. And it seemed like even though he wanted a partner, he wasn't willing to, at least according to Sabrina, make those changes in his life to accommodate for being a couple, considering a spouse or a partner, and not showing up for Christmas and kind of prioritizing his work. And that's fine. If you want to be a career person, if you want to prioritize your work, that's fine. But do you think there are a lot of people in it for the wrong reasons that come on the show?
I think so. So I don't think Demi was necessarily that person. I think the show did deeply impact her. I think she went on the show thinking she was ready and found out she's not. Because like people don't know until they know, right? You just don't know what you don't know. You think you're ready for marriage one minute, and then you go on Love is Blind and you move back in with your parents because you've had such an impact on your life. There are definitely other people, not pointing at anyone. There are definitely other people who go on the show who are like ready to be a social media influencer, and I just don't give a shit who they marry or get proposed to. They just want to make it all the way, And then, once it's over, if they don't get there, they're absolutely fine. They just move on with their lives, and that's it. Those people exist. I've met them. But as far as like Steven goes, I had a lot of mixed feelings at the reunion, though. He seemed like he was really holding back from saying something.
Yeah.
Because it seemed like he was getting laid into a little bit, and he was just like, kind of like, I have to be the bigger person here. I don't know if that's true, but that goes to the nature of the show. You don't see everything. And, I don't think necessarily either of them were painted in a horrible light.
No,
I
not
do
at
think
all.
like Steven might come out looking a little more like the jerk here, but it really looked like he was just like, I'm just going to let this go and move on.
I definitely could see, at least I can relate to Steven in that if somebody comes with specific examples in an argument or asks me for specific examples, sometimes I get so flustered and I can't even remember my own name, let alone what happened 10 minutes ago or a week ago. So
Yeah.
I can see that. But, and we'll talk about this a little bit, there's been some TikToks and some accusations that have come out about Steven's behavior from other cast members. And I'll just tease that because we're not quite there yet. We're going to talk about after the reunion. But there have been some things that come up that have made me question. And again, the motives for coming on this show, and I'm not trying to compare Demi and Steven at all. Please, nobody think that or come at me for that. I totally think you could think you're ready for marriage, kind of like Demi. And like you said, her reality and expectations were very different. Steven, I don't know. Jury's still out. I've never met the man. But from what I've seen online, I do think I agree with you that some people use it as a platform to kind of launch their careers. And I forget who made this point. I want to say it was like Rob from Love Island or something, or maybe Nick from Nick Vial, where you want attention to some degree coming on these shows. If you're willing to come on these shows, there's something, whether it's an influencer platform, whether it's to find love, you're willing to put your life out there publicly. So to say completely, you don't want to use it as a jumping point isn't realistic because there are a lot of opportunities that come from reality TV. But I think it can be a balance. It's not black and white, at least to me. Like, do you think there's people that definitely only came on the show for fame and will have done whatever they needed to, even if it's saying I do, to get that platform?
It's a small minority, and they lie to production all the way through interviews and everything to get to that point. And it is a small minority, but they do exist. And then the flip side, there are people who I know who almost got like zero airtime, who were genuinely there to get married, who were very motivated by it, who kept their head down and, kind of stepped away gracefully. Because, a lot of my friends from the show, a lot of people from previous seasons, if you get engaged in this thing and you go on, there's a good chance you're going to be getting $100,000 contracts thrown at you just to eat Breyer's ice cream for 1 second on Instagram. Right?
Yeah.
And so
it's crazy.
I took a sample of the population in this country and said, hey, look, if you could make, $500,000, $1 million just by going on this show and pretending to fall in love, would you do it? And a lot of them would say yes. And then some would go, well, I might try to fall in love. And if it doesn't work out, I still get paid. So props to the people who go on the show and like are really there for the right reasons, keep their head down and end up, leaving when it doesn't work out for them. Right. Because there's nothing stopping someone from going on and, bullshitting their way through, proposing and just being like, oh yeah, I'm madly in love with someone and, faking it till you make it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, I know there's screening processes for you guys, right? We've heard that there's very long applications and questionnaires and mental health assessments and all these, but you can't stop somebody from lying about who they are or their intentions. It's not, you guys don't have lie detector tests, right? Like there's no.
Yeah, I think what people from the fans, from my understanding, I think they want the FBI to do a comprehensive background check on every
Uh-huh.
bowel movement I've ever taken and make sure that I've never had a miss shit. So, I mean, the
Yeah.
level that they think Netflix is going to go through to vet people is offensive in its own.
You know, if Netflix hired a couple of the fans, and I know you know which ones I'm talking about, but I think they would dig up some things that even the FBI couldn't find, because some of these fans,
Yeah.
hi Melanie, are really, really good at digging and finding out information that you might have not even know about yourself.
Yeah, well,
So,
it's interesting. So Melanie's the fan that is also super kind. Like, she found
mhm.
out I was on the show well before they released any information about us, and messaged me and was super polite and knew a lot about me. And then when stuff did get dramatic, she messaged everyone just to see how they were doing. And so,
Mhm.
great human being. Seriously.
Yeah, she's awesome. I've tried to get her on the show a couple of times. I think she prefers to stay behind the scenes, which is fine. But we appreciate you, Melanie, and all of your LIB FBI digging. Now, I want to talk a bit about Maria and Tom, because they, I think, have the most incompatibilities, with kids, with finances, with upbringings, with lifestyles. Now, when I see a couple like that get engaged, I just think, what are you guys talking about in the pods? You're supposedly there like 12 hours a day dating, especially when it
That's
gets
about a
down towards the
180.
end. Okay, what is your theory on like what the decision making process is there? Because it just did not seem like there was anything that was going to work out about that.
Other than them BSing, somebody clearly had blinders on through that whole thing, because, like, when you get to the reunion compared to like the it's just, they're just not even in the same realm.
Yeah.
And there's a victim in all this, and I liked her a lot, but Natasha, I was like, she
Yes,
seemed
Tosh.
so sweet and so genuine and so in it for the right reason. And you know I don't know, she might have came out better off in the end, I'll say that. But because obviously, just getting engaged to someone doesn't make life better. Obviously, you need to be compatible, and
Right.
judging with how things went with Maria and Tom, I don't know if it would have gone any different for Tosh and Tom. So, but we'll
One of the
see.
things I did recently was I came up with a list of 6 things I would change if I was a Love Is Blind producer. So one of the things I want you to come up with is some things that you think are non-negotiables when you're in those pods that you have to be compatible with life-wise. I'm going to start with the first thing being if you want kids or not. I mean, and how you're going to raise them. I think that is something that everybody should have to. Do you guys fill out surveys for these things? Do they give you insight on each other before you get into the pods? Because how did these two end up together?
I don't know. That's on them. I mean, like, the producers will give you like just suggested questions. They're not a must, but it's like, yeah, we get you're together a long time. Here's some topics you might want to talk about. Um, some of the ones that they might not show, I don't see it often, is there's uh, an intimacy, you know, date where you talk about,
Sure.
really quite intimate, like raunchy detail. Um,
Okay.
and I think maybe I just assumed everyone was on the same page on that, but when I got to my dates and we talked about that, it was all over the board. I mean, just like, and I feel like that's something that's like obviously pretty important, but you know, that's not the most important thing by far. But um, yeah, you're definitely getting questions to ask. Whether or not you ask them, it's on you. But they spent enough time together that they should have known where they sat on certain things. But then again, and I'm not saying this is them, maybe they just, one or both of them was just like, hey, look, this is our opportunity, let's just fake it till we make it and see where this goes.
Do you think that was both of them, or do you think it was one more than the other?
You know, I'm not really sure. I'm
Okay.
you know, again, I think Tosh seemed very genuine. So, I think she's,
Yeah.
quote, like the odd man out in this thing, because I thought Maria and Tom were otherwise pretty similar in like the sense of how they acted.
Okay. All right. Saying a lot without saying too much. We are not going to get to everything today. I know you have to get going. We're going to have to do a part 2. So the last thing I want to ask you about, at least today, is Kat and Freddie. Were you surprised by his no at the altar?
Honestly,
Yeah.
no.
Honestly.
I think I wondered that myself too. Like, if I made it to the altar with somebody that I had a strong connection with, if I would even say yes, because you realize that they only have like a month to do that,
Mhm.
right? And even in a situation where I could see them ending up together, I could see them saying yes, I could see them, tying the knot. I'm never all that surprised when people say no, because I think
Okay.
it is a lot of pressure in a very short period of time, and you don't have a lot of time to consult with the outside world to
Sure.
make probably the biggest decision of your life. So I never hold it against people who say no at the altar. I really don't. I mean, it is a huge deal, and for some people it will work out if they continue to date. There's no reason they can't tie the knot in the future.
Yeah, that's another big thing. And again, I know you have to go, so I want to talk about that next time. How much of a surprise are the yeses and the nos to each other? If there's pressure to not continue dating from Netflix, we still have to talk about Sam. Sam, you are a big topic here over at the LovePod universe, so we will get to you next time. And then all of the post-show gossip, the Demi, Ollie, Jasmine argument, what Shirley had to say about Steven, why we didn't hear from Kat and Sam about their confrontation or their flirtation. So much more to come. So, Vince, again, thank you for coming and for joining us on this season of the Love Pod. We are so excited that you're here to co host this season and that we are part of the Reality After Show Network. We love you and we will see you next time.
Ciao.
Bye.